I'm Rodney Allen with Rodney Allen and Associates LLC, with safety consulting firm Osha. We specialize in Osha. My partner is Andy Fox with the Fox Business Group LLC. Yeah, he's hosting this event this evening. I want to welcome everybody here. I hope that we have some fun. You ask questions. It's going to be an interactive type thing. It's going to be kind of informal, casual. I just want everybody to learn and to enjoy themselves while we're doing that. Any questions? Anybody got any questions or concerns or issues? Okay. We're going to start out with what I call Hazard Communication 2012, the revised standard for what changes you can expect in the workplace. Yeah, this word, Okay, why did OSHA align the hazard communication standard with a globally harmonized system? A common coherent approach to classifying and communicating chemical hazards. Harmonized definitions of hazards. Specific criteria for labels. Harmonized format for the safety data sheets. These PowerPoints, they're very good, but what I would like to do is kind of take a little time out and just have a moment of silence for the people that was killed in Paris, France. So if we can just do that for a moment, to have silence, to honor them. Thank you very much. I know how they feel in France now, because I felt the same way when we had 9/11. We had all our people killed by terrorists. So we just want to send out our prayers to the president, and the people of French and their relatives and everything. Want to send out our prayers to them. The benefits of adopting the global harmonized system. You increase the quality and consistency of information provided to the workers, employers, and chemical users. You reduce the confusion, increase comprehension of hazards, improve downstream risk management, facilitate training, and you help address literacy problems. The other benefits include facilitation of international trade in chemicals. Development of the final rule. Okay, an ANPR, I'm not going to get into any of these alphabet soups or these acronyms. All you need to know is it was modified to the existing health communication standard to align with the globally harmonized system. Was published in 2006. It was also published in the Federal Register September 30, 2009. There was a public hearing in 2010. The final rule was published in the Federal Registration on March 26, 2012. All this slide is talking about is the rulemaking process that OSHA had to go through in order to get this standard out to the public. You can ask any questions. If you got any questions, you can ask any questions at any time. Don't hesitate. This is your meeting, and I want to make sure that everybody learns some and have a good time. So matter of fact, I welcome questions. Notable changes. They're using a specification approach rather than a performance-oriented approach. This is kind of different. Of all the standards that OSHA has had, including bloodborne pathogens, process safety management, HAZWOPER, they've all been performance-based. It gives what the performance-based standards do. Yes. Yes, ma'am. You got a question? What the performance-based standard do is it gives the employer flexibility in terms of how they're going to carry forth or carry out the written letter of the law, of the standard. Well, if you get into the specification, OSHA tells you exactly what you have to do, and you cannot deviate from that. So that's the difference between performance-based. So performance-based allows you to use your best available control technology and it also looks at whatever is feasible and whatever is reasonable, and it looks at it from a financial standpoint in terms of cost and regulatory burden that you may have to carry. So labels are hazard classification rather than hazard determination. Labels are more defined and will now require a product identifier, a pictogram, signal word, hazard statements, precautionary statements, the name, the address, and the telephone number. It's important to have the name, the address, and telephone number, because if you run into a chemical that you don't know anything about, you can call the manufacturer, the distributor, or the importer of that chemical, and you can get more information about how to deal with that if it's a spill, or if it's a release into the atmosphere, or anything else that goes along with that. In terms of how to fight it, and if there was a fire that occurred, you would also get that information. Notable changes continue. Safety data sheet rather than material safety data sheet. It uses a 16 section format. They got rid of the material because it was confusing. Material was confusing. OSHA, that's what many employers have known for years about material. It could be either material could be a compound, a substance, or it could be a material. So they just said, well, we'll just call them safety data sheets. And they made it uniform and standardized to 16 sections so that there won't be no more confusion, because in the past, what's happened is companies and manufacturers, what they would do would, they put the information down any kind of way they wanted. It was no consistency. And so this is supposed to be better for everybody, to be consistent.
So what you're saying is, with the safety data sheet, rather than the material data sheet, so before they were material specific, and are you using a general safety data sheet now that outlines all the chemicals, or I'm trying to understand what that means?
Well, in terms of a safety data sheet, they just dropped the material. The United States used the word material in their nomenclature. What the United States is trying to do, and about 20 other countries that agreed to go with this globalized, harmonized system, what they agreed to do is that they will be consistent worldwide.
So it's universal?
Yeah, it's universal.
Okay.
I mean, I grew up with material safety data sheets, and that's what I feel comfortable with. But at some point in life, we all have to get out of our comfort zone and to make progress. And this is what this standard is about. It's about the future. It's about one world, one united standard, and one way of protecting all the workers of the world, not just any individual company. What I need to explain too is what happened the reason all this came about was the United Nations back in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, had a meeting. One of their conventions, United Nations Convention on Environmental Development, came up with this global harmonized system. And the reason it is because, like I say, there was a lot of duplication of efforts. There was a lot of duplication. There was a confusion, and products that were shipped from one country to the other country. It couldn't be followed very well. It wasn't tracked very well. So they said, well, we'll just make everything standardized so that a person in Spain can understand a material safety data sheet coming from the United States, and a person in France can understand a material safety data sheet coming from Bermuda or Austria or Australia. so everybody would be on the same page. And that's what it is. We're trying to unite the world and take care of the environment. And so it's an environmental thing that in terms of common ways of disposing of these chemicals and getting away from landfilling chemicals. And we're trying to get away from burning chemicals, putting it in the air, because all you're doing is just, you're burning it taking it from one location and putting it to another location, but you still got the same problem that the chemical initially had in terms of dealing with it. Do you understand that? Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
It makes sense? Okay, thank you.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, ma'am.
Does OSHA work with public safety and emergency management?
I tell you the thing.
How do they work together?
Well, OSHA was founded. It was founded back in 1970. The act came about in 1969, but it was officially formed in 1970. And the reason OSHA was formed, it was designed to be an employee and employer relationship. If you have an employee-employer relationship, then you fall under the jurisdiction of OSHA, whether you're a private employer or a public employer. Now, if you have people working for you and they're volunteers, and you do not control the environment that they work in, what that means is they don't fall under the jurisdiction of OSHA. So OSHA, you got to think first and foremost, it's an employee-employer relationship where you have control over the work environment and also potentially control over the employee by giving him or her directions in terms of what they can and cannot do. Does that make sense? Yeah, any other questions? Thank you. The modifier has a communication standard. How hazard communication works? Basically, I can't even see this. Let me walk up here to the board. Chemical manufacturers and importers. And then I can't even see this. We're going to skip that slide. Organization of the final rule. This is the way the hazard communication standard of 2012 is broken down. You have the purpose, you have the scope and application, you have definitions, you have hazard classification, then you have a written hazard communication program, you have labels and other forms of warning, you have safety data sheets, employee information and training, trade secrets, effective days, and you got the appendices, A through F, which may or may not be mandatory. So that's on a case-by-case basis. You have to read the appendices, and they'll tell you if there's mandatory. Because OSHA is not the only agency that really is affected by the rulemaking. You have the EPA, and you have the Environmental Protection Agency, and you have the Department of Transportation. They also have their jurisdictions. It's kind of like having the FBI, the sheriff, the city. You know, when you come on the scene, depending on whose jurisdiction it is, that's who takes charge, takes control. It says, just like I was saying, Appendix A is health hazard criteria, is mandatory, and that's new. That's new in the standard. Appendix B is physical hazard criteria, is mandatory, and that's new. Appendix C is allocation of label elements, mandatory, and it's new. Appendix D is safety data sheets, is mandatory, and it's new. Appendix E is definition of trade secret, that's mandatory. And Appendix F is guidance for hazard classifications, such as carcinogency is a non-mandatory, but it's new. Any questions? I see I see Dr. Marvina Allen has a puzzling question on her face.
Just taking it in right now.
You just taking it in? Like I say, anytime you got any questions, got any concerns or any issues, just let me know and I'll stop and I'll try to answer your question. The purpose, what this slide does for you, it shows you a dichotomy of the Hazard Communication Standard of 1994. That's the year that the Hazard Communication Standard came out. And then it shows you the Hazard Communication of 2012. That's the year that, how can I say it? The United Nations has what they call the Purple Book. Because the book is colored purple for the globally harmonized system. And in 2012, the United Nations has 3 revisions, and OSHA adopted the 3rd revision. But as it stands today, which is 2015, the United Nations has gone from 3 revisions to 5 revisions. But OSHA has chosen to go with the 3rd revision. Because at some point, you got to make a decision. You got to cut it off, and you got to go with what you got. Basically, there's a 4-year phase-in period from, it was from 2010 to 2016. Well, that's 6 years, but basically it was a 4-year phase-in period. 2012 to 2016, excuse me. So that's going to come back. I'm going to talk further about that phase-in period, that transitional period from 2012 to 2016. Basically, it gives all employers and all chemical manufacturers and importers an opportunity to come up to compliance with the standard. That's basically what that transition is all about. And I'll give you some dates where everything is supposed to happen. As we go further into the PowerPoint presentation, you'll see this. Scope and application. See, you can see the differences between 1994 and 2012. These are the changes that we're talking about. In 1994, all chemicals known to be present are covered. And the 2000 version, which is OSHA is enforcing, minimal changes except to conform to terminology and remove reference to current Appendix E, which has been deleted from the standard, and a clarification on the federalism. So you had, in 1994, you had practical accommodations for special situations. You had addresses interface with other federal laws. What happened is, in 1994, basically, let's see, 1994, all chemicals known to be present are covered, practical accommodations and special addresses interface with other federal laws, minimum changes. So basically, you got to also realize that during this period of transition, since we're in year 2015, you got to realize that people still are still covered by the 1994 HAZCOM standard. You still got to do it. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's kind of like the Bible. You got the Old Testament and you got the New Testament. There's a transition period. The Old Testament didn't go away. You know, it still exists. You still got those rules, regulations. It's just that with the Bible, you got the New Testament. You know, is less. It's by grace. You understand what I'm saying? Everybody understand what I'm saying? You still have to obey what's going on in 1994, but at the same time, you gotta do what's going on in 2012.
You're saying in 1994, those are rules that were established. As we go on in life, from our mistakes we learn.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Right.
And this is how the rules and
Can you speak up, please?
Standards and what have you changed.
Okay.
So in 2012, of course, they looked like they were improved. Minimal improvement.
Right.
Improvement, but they were changed.
Right.
And so each company will have to come into compliance. Right. With the 2012, and like you say, they will be given an opportunity to meet that standard.
Exactly.
I don't know how you know, how many years or what that?
4 years. There's a 4 year from 2012 to 2016.
To meet that standard.
I'm gonna get a little ahead of myself. June 1st, 2016, everybody has to be in compliance with HASCOM 2012 in the United States. In the United States.
How large a business are you talking about, or how small a business?
Anybody, any business that has remember, I'm going to go back to that employee-employer relationship.
Right.
If you are an employer and you have an employee, I don't care if it's one, and you have chemicals on your job site, you have to be in compliance with the standard. You have to follow the standard wherever is appropriate.
I see. Even if just one employee, a part-time employee?
It doesn't matter as long as you control. If you control the work environment or you control that employee, they fall under OSHA's jurisdiction.
Okay.
Yeah, so good questions. I like that. You're a good crowd tonight. I like that. Okay, definitions. In 1994, it includes specific definitions for terms used in the standard, as well as all physical hazards. Now, as you can see in the 2012, it's a little more in-depth. Basically, you can think of it like this. The HASCOM 1994 is commonly referred to as your right to know. Well, what they did was, in HASCOM 2012, they went from your right to know to your right to understand. And that's supposed to be give workers more knowledge, more information to protect themselves and to so that they don't come down with any kind of illness or diseases that these chemicals basically may bring upon them. I had a case where a guy worked at a gas plant, and he was using a chemical, and he wasn't being properly protected while using that chemical, so he went to the doctor, and the doctor checked his liver out. His liver was damaged, and the doctor told him, "You need to stop drinking." He said, "I don't drink." He said, "Well, your liver is damaged." And what it was the guy don't drink. He didn't drink. He was a teetotaler. And what it was that it was the chemical that was causing his liver damage. So things like that come up. You know, once.
Proper gear.
Yeah, proper. Yeah,
for the
right,
chemicals in which
right.
you're using.
Yeah, exactly.
What's
And
the penalty for that?
what's the penalty for it?
Yeah. I mean, what can the employer be charged with?
Well, there's really, OSHA.
Can you repeat the question?
What is the penalty for it?
On what side, the employee
Employer.
or the employer?
Employer.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, now that answers the question.
Okay, yeah, well, you get into the employer and the employee. They both have rights and responsibilities. It's everybody's right, from the janitor to the CEO, to be responsible and be safety conscious and to make sure that the workplace is free of any kind of hazards. Make sure it's not unsafe, that it's safe and healthy. So it's everybody's responsibility. But it takes the burden of proof that the employer or the employee basically injured themselves, or sometimes you'll hear situations. I've gone on job sites where employers say, well, the employee either hurt or killed himself. So, you know, I'm thinking, this guy got up in the morning, kissed his wife goodbye, his children goodbye, and with the intention of, I'm going to go off to work and kill myself. Now, that's ridiculous. You know, nobody goes off to work and says, I'm going to kill myself today. And it's very difficult to get a criminal conviction. I mean, it has to be, because you got lawyers involved, and a lot of it is based on how well can a lawyer defend his case or preach his case or her case. So it's very difficult. You know, people say, well, people should be going to jail. I mean, it's a matter of regardless of what side of the fence you're on, the employee side or the employer side. Basically, as a safety professional, it's my responsibility to protect the employer. But at night, at the end of the day, I have to go home and I have to live with myself. I have a conscience. So that way I have to look out for the employee. So I have to tell my employer, as a safety professional, I have to tell my employer, look, this is what's going on, and this is what we need to do. And these are the remedies that we need to enact. And hopefully, by my pleading the case, I'm generally the safety professional is the only one standing between the employee and the employer. And he has to, like I say, he's being paid by the employer, and it's his responsibility and job to ensure that the employer is being in compliance. It's all about compliance. And if the employer knowingly is out of compliance and not trying to do anything about it, then you can get a case of negligence or even worse. So it's a very serious thing. It's a tricky thing, but it's also very serious because you got people's lives that are in the balance, and you got the people's futures that are in the balance. So, did I answer your question?
You said something about the penalty
Yeah.
of the negligence.
Right.
And how
Yeah.
it affect the employer was the question.
Right.
And I want to know what the answer was to that.
Right. So in other words, what we're trying to get at is, if the employer is found negligent, what can the government do to that employer to penalize them?
They can get fined and they can go to jail.
Fined and go to jail.
Yes.
And what types of fines are we talking about here?
It depends on the employer. It depends on the size, the monetary. If you get somebody that's making millions, then you want the fine to be in such a way that it sends a message.
Okay.
So it's got to be appropriate. But the biggest thing that OSHA really doesn't want the money for the fines. They want the employer to take that money and use it to make the corrections necessary in order to make the workplace safe and helpful.
Oh.
So, but so OSHA is not around to play I got you or Mr. Employer, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna catch you. Like I said, the whole reason for OSHA coming about was there was a reason why OSHA was created, and that was because we were getting a lot of people injured and killed, and so as a result of over 40 years of being around, OSHA has made a big difference in terms of employer relationships. It's the same thing with unions. Like with unions, they in the beginning they were looking out for the worker and fairness and that type of thing, and that's still needed because if you don't have rules and regulations, people have a tendency to become complacent.
You need that middle man.
Yeah, you need that middle person there that.
Like on my job, if I go out, the city supposed to supply me with safety equipment.
Exactly.
If they give me safety equipment and I go out there and I don't put those in my best interest, then they did their job.
Right.
They did their job, so vice versa.
Right. It's simple.
Give it to me, then it's on them.
Yeah, the responsibility. It goes back to saying the responsibility is on everybody, but the employee has to take the initiative as well as the employer. He or she has to take the initiative to do what the law requires, because really, OSHA rules and regulations are the law of the land. And so when you're dealing with the law of land, and this is a country of rules and regulations and laws, probably the greatest country in the world, nobody else. That's why investors want to come to this country and invest their money rather than some other place, because they know that the rules and the laws, they can take, if they have a complaint or a grievance, they can take it to the court system and they can get justice.
So it also sets you up for liabilities in suits,
Oh, yeah.
all kind of,
Yeah, exactly,
No.
exactly,
because if the training isn't adequate,
exactly.
how do you ensure? If the employee, like you were saying, this employee in particular, I don't know if this individual was trained,
Right.
had the appropriate training, I don't know if the facility itself per se were in compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
Knowledge.
there's so many things happening. with what-
Well, you gotta look at it like this. The people that put the material safety data or the safety data sheets, I get confused sometimes. Like I said, I like material safety data sheets, but safety data sheets together are generally people with advanced degrees, masters and PhDs. Now, you're expecting a person with maybe a 6th or 8th grade reading level, or even a 12th grade reading level, or a first year college or whatever. But the average person, worker, let's say with an most newspapers are written on a 6th to 8th grade level, to understand what a person who's got advanced training and education to understand. The complexity of the problem is there. So you need, I mean, you take for example the United States military. United States military spends millions and millions of dollars to make their instructions and their rules and everything understandable, so that a person with a 6th grade or 8th grade education can understand it. So you're talking about, it takes a lot. It involves a lot. So so if a person got to have an advanced degree to put together a safety data sheet, then I mean, you can see where I'm going with this. Yeah, go.
Now, but if you, this is the purpose for this training tonight,
Yes,
is that you educate me.
yes,
And that's the purpose for an employer.
yes,
When you have these same standards,
right,
safety data sheet,
right,
we have to make it user-friendly.
exactly,
For all
exactly,
people.
exactly.
It doesn't matter about education.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you're going to have different walks of life going to come in there.
Exactly.
And it has to be user-friendly
Yeah,
for everybody. So they're not going to write it
right.
different from me with a doctorate than anybody else.
Right.
Itself is a hazard.
Well,
So that still falls back on training.
yeah, it's more back on training, but you got to understand, I'm a chemist by training. I have a bachelor's in chemistry, and I have an MBA in business. When I was in school, I had to put forth the effort in order to research and to understand what I needed to know if I was going to spend 20 hours to know a subject that I totally didn't know. In the beginning, I would feel like an idiot because I didn't know. But after that 20 hours of studying it, asking questions, examining it, then I became what I call an expert. So there's got to be time and effort put into this. You know, it's got to be, you got to be patient. You got to take care of the people that are working for you, so that you take care of them and they take care of you. You take care of your employees, your customers are going to be happier, and they're going to be more productive. Your employees are going to be more productive, and your profit margin is going to increase. So it's all, you know, I look at it, because I got an MBA, I look at it like this. There's the 5 Ps. You got the product, you got price, you got place, you got profit, and you got promotion. Those 5 areas have to be addressed. Profit in most business schools today is left out. They don't talk about profit, the 5th P, profit. But the reason I bring this up is because it's not about money. It's about, profit is about a scorecard. If you don't know what gets measured gets done. If you don't measure it, then it doesn't exist. There's no way, you don't know exactly what, you have no history, you have no idea of exactly where you are, where you came from, or where you're going. So that's something to think about. I see, Doctor, you're thinking very deeply. You got some questions? You got a question on that, Doctor? Okay, thank you. Well, you lost the signal.
Yeah, I said help.
Help. How do I work this, Andy?
Your computer went to sleep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. See, I need help, and we all need help. You know, it goes back to the question, am I my brother's keeper? Everybody has, regardless of what side of the fence you fall on. But I'm telling you right now, I got a case where I have a fraternity brother that worked for IBM for 30 years, and they had suppliers, and the suppliers will have problems. Instead of firing the supplier, what they would do is go in and help the supplier, because in the long run, it's better to help them rather than to let them flounder and fail. And if you can do that, then once again, I go back to, am I my brother's keeper? You answer your own question.
Strong as the weakest link.
Yes, yes,
That's just how it is.
yes,
If this person is not doing well, me
Yes.
as an employer, I need to, get remedial training.
yes, that's true.
And then get signature of understanding.
Right, right, right.
You don't want to put anybody out there.
Right. And like I said, I was in the Navy, and in the Navy, the only way the Navy fired somebody is if they gave them a bad conduct discharge. But they bend over backwards. They did everything they can to work with a person. And if they had to give you a bad conduct discharge, then you might as well say there's no hope for you, because it doesn't make sense to put all that money and that time and that training into a person and then just throw them away like they're a used container. So that's why I understand that you need to help people so that they can help people and raise each other up on the social economic ladder. And that's what we're all about here. And that's what this is all about. Any questions? Any comments? Hazard classification, once again, I was like, 1994 was performance-oriented, and in 2012 it's specific in detail. They're not giving you any wiggle room. These things you must do. They're telling you exactly how to do it. Normally, OSHA had gotten to the point where, with these performance-oriented, they allow you to figure out how you're going to do it. Now, they're in this standard 2012, they're telling you how they want you to do it. Andy, you all right?
I'm fine.
Yeah, I don't like to get boring, because I get boring. I fall asleep when I get bored. So that's why I try to interact, ask questions, get comments, that type of thing. Hazard classification. See, even with me, with a chemist, being trained as a chemist, a lot of this stuff, it's not everyday stuff. It's not like watching the news or reading the newspaper. Stuff that you repeatedly hit over the head with day in and day out. This stuff is like I said, once again, this is advanced study stuff, information. And it has to be broken down to a level that a 5-year-old can understand. Once you do that, if you break it down to the level that some people feel offended by saying you're insulting my intelligence. It's not about insulting anybody's intelligence. What it is about is we want you to get it, and we want you to be safe and be helpful. So each physical or health hazard is a hazard class. Example, carcinogenicity. It'll tell you, the chemical will tell you, well, that by carcinogenicity means that does it cause cancer? Mutagenicity means, is it a birth defect? Can it cause birth defects? And if you got young women working with chemicals that are at a childbearing age, is this chemical gonna cause them not to be able to have kids? It's gonna cause them to be sterile. Same way with men, young men. They need to know these things. They need to be able to ask these questions with intelligence and with understanding. And that's why they move from your right to know to your right to understand. If you understand something, you're in a better position than just knowing. Hazard communication continuum. Manufacturers are still responsible, underline that word, still responsible, for determining the hazards of the chemicals they produce or import. That's where those people with those advanced degrees come in at. They put the stuff down on the paper, and they have to, it falls back on them. Really, you're talking about a legal document. Classification similar to hazard determination is based on the full range of available information, Procedures for determining if the manufacturer has properly performed the hazard classification are provided in Appendix A, Health, and Appendix B. Unless you've been properly trained, like I've been properly trained, Maryland OSHA spent over $100,000 in training me, in over 18 months of training me as an industrial hygienist. And I had to go through a process where had to be taught the different stages, the different sections of a hazard, of a standard. If you get into a hazardous waste operation emergency response, there's a requirement that you do a physical, and then there's a requirement that you do while you're on the job working, you get a physical there, and at the end of the job you get a physical, because they want to track you whether or not you picked up anything while you was working. So a lot of the standards that came out in the 90s, like 92, 94, whatever, they had those requirements about training. They require you to do training. They may be like bloodborne pathogens, for example. They require you to get training. They require you to get through 3 shots. They require you to sign a paper saying, I decline taking the shot. You know, declination, they call it, things of that nature, depending on what the hazard is, where the standard will fall. Like in chemical hygiene plan, for example, dealing with laboratories, you're working in chemicals. And anytime a chemical comes into a work site and an employee is exposed to that chemical, they have to be trained on that chemical. Initial training, and then if something changes, you have to redo the training. You have to bring them up to speed, and they have to be told where the materials, where the safety data sheets are, and they have to have access to any chemical that they're exposed to or they're going to be working with within a reasonable 2-hour time frame. It could be electronic, it could be in a book, a binder, but you have to do all these things. And for a person like me, I've been trained, I've been educated, more so than the average man or woman. So even with all that training, I still have difficulty staying on top of compliance issues. You have to continually educate yourself and update yourself and train yourself. It's a continuous, non-stop process. The process I went through when I was in the Navy, when I was being trained in nuclear power, all these type of things. You constantly go into a training cycle. It never stops. You constantly got to be training. And what it does is just gives you a better outlook on life and a better chance, a better shot. You got something to say, Andy?
No,
Oh, have I said anything wrong, or?
not that I know of.
Oh, okay. Okay. Are you learning something?
I am.
Oh, okay.
I thought I knew about this stuff. You've added some insight into it.
I'm glad to hear that, Andy. That's exactly what I want to do. I want you to have fun doing it.
Yeah.
Health hazards. Once again, they got what they call acute toxicity. All that is short term. You got acute and you got chronic. Chronic is long term. Let's say a person has, let's say a person gets hit by a bus. That's acute. That's short term. They're going to die right away. That's, you know. But let's say a person has hepatitis B and he's a carrier or she's a carrier. That's chronic. It's not going to affect them today. It may affect them 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And that's what happens in some cases. You got people working in coal mines, they get the black lung, or people working in asbestos in the military, on Navy ships, plumbers, auto technicians changing out brakes where it has asbestos in it, and they don't really realize it until 30 or 40 years later, and they end up dying from it. But it's kind of like if a person gets killed in a car, people don't think that much about it. But when an airplane goes down with 282 people aboard, it has a big impact. It's psychology that's all involved in this too. More people are killed by driving cars. Your chance of being killed and driving a car is greater than your chance of being killed flying in an airplane. It's the same thing that I'm talking here. Well, you can go down through this. This slide is health hazards. They, like I say, you need an advanced degree to figure this out. You know what I mean? So, you know, what do the numbers mean? Health category. We have what they call the health material identification system. Basically, on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being the least severe, and 4 being the most severe. That's what OSHA has always followed. But in this new standard, 2012, it's the opposite. 1 being the most severe, and 4 being the least severe. So that's another change. And I don't know why they did that, but it has to do with this. Probably was done in some other countries, probably in Europe or Japan, or before it was done, and then we just made a decision. We're going to go with this one. Somebody made, in a position of authority, made that decision. They put it out to the public, but you know, who knows what happened as a result of that. All we know is we got the final product, and this is what we have to follow. It's the law of the land now.
Well, let me just ask you, this is a lot of material for employers to be well aware of.
Of course.
How frequently do you get trained?
You're supposed to get trained. The timetables for training is December 1st, 2013. You're supposed to train employees on the new label elements and the safety data sheet format. That is passed.
Right.
Okay. June 1st, 2015, you have to be in compliance with all modified provisions of the final rule, except the distributor should not ship containers labeled by the chemical manufacturer or importer unless it is globally harmonized system label. And by June 1st, 2016, update alternative workplace labeling and hazard communication program as necessary, and provide additional employee training for newly identified physical or health hazards. What I used to do when I went to inspect workplaces, in terms of the training, when new chemicals came to the company, the first place they would go to would be the shipping department, and we would tell the shipping department, if the material comes in and doesn't have a safety data sheet with it, don't accept it. Send it back. You know, and then you try to be reasonable. If you try to show some flexibility, if a chemical came in and didn't have a material safety data sheet, you would get on the phone and call the company that made the chemical, that shipped the chemical, whatever, and either have them email, fax, or you a copy of that material safety data sheet, so that you will have it on file. But the bottom line is, the key is, if a chemical came in that didn't have a material safety data sheet and it was a hazardous chemical, don't accept it. Because if you start accepting it without a material safety data sheet, all that's going to do is help you become out of compliance. And that's against the rules and the regulations.
So Rodney, I believe what Andy was saying, you were inquiring about how often is the training? Is that annually and as needed?
No, I mean,
What is the training?
I remember when I first started with the city, they used to have, every year we used to have,
refresher training.
yeah, on that. But now I think they just do the new
Well,
high, employees.
You call it initial. You get your initial training when they hire you as an employee. And part of your orientation package is to get the initial training. But then they also, when a new chemical is introduced into the workplace and you're going to be working with it, they're supposed to train you. They're supposed to train you on that chemical before you start working with it. They're supposed to train you on that chemical. That's the way it works. See, the thing about it is, you got to understand, OSHA are the minimum requirements, and to be competitive in today's world, you gotta do the right thing, and you gotta think long term, as well as short term, as well as medium term. But in the long term, by you cutting corners or you're not doing something here that you shouldn't do, it's going to come and bite you down the road. So you might as well do it right. It's cheaper to do it right the first time than have to do it a second or third or fourth time. That puts company out of business.
So what you're saying is that the person would be trained initially during the new hire process,
Right,
Right.
right? So they'll learn about the chemicals in which they're going to be working with.
right,
And then in the event that new chemicals are introduced or accidents take place,
right,
that's when you have the remedial training.
right.
And would there be annual training? Depends on how does that work?
It depends on the the employer. That's the employer's responsibility. But if I was the employer, I would give the training annually, at least.
That's what I would.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So.
Well, if there's a shortage of instructors, I mean, you have to like, if you got your own business and everything, you have to have someone in that business to take that, so he can pass it on to the.
I'm gonna tell you what I am. You have to understand when a company is starting up, a company is concerned about cash flow. They're concerned about expenses. What can they get away with? What can they do without?
Right.
And generally, safety is not high on the priority list, because in the beginning, when you start up, everything is usually just slow, it's small, and then as you start to grow and get bigger, then things become faster and more hectic. And if you haven't, I'll tell you, what OSHA is trying to do is get every employer, regardless of the size of the employer, to do a comprehensive safety plan. It's kind of like you're doing a comprehensive business plan. What it is, if you've thought about the big things and taking care of those, when the small things come up, you're not in a panic mode or you're not in a reactive mode, you're proactive. So the plan, by putting together the plan, it's about being proactive rather than reactive. And if you're going to be proactive, it's going to, in the long run, it's going to make you more profitable. If you're reactive, in the long run, it's going to put you out of business. So, that's what they say. The bad actors, sooner or later, they go out of business. You'll see in the paper this company, for example, I was looking the other day here in Bradenton, a company called Crystal. I'm not saying I don't know anything about them, but one day I was looking at them in business, and the next day I saw them out of business. Why? You got to ask yourself why. Well, I'll hazard to say it's because of management. You're only as good as your management team. Yeah.
And back to the training.
Yeah.
What he was saying is true. Oftentimes, I having my own company,
Yeah.
myself, I would go and ascertain all the pertinent training that I would need.
Right.
And then I would take my training and come back and train my people.
Right.
Utilizing the material in which they gave me.
Right.
And then I will allow and sit and ask questions just like we're doing in this open forum.
Right.
But they will have to sign a piece of paper saying that I understand.
Well, let me put it this way.
You can do that.
Well,
You have the right to do that when you have your own company. You don't have to go out and get anybody.
no, you don't.
That's-
But let me explain something to you about having somebody sign something saying they understand. They may not understand what they were supposed to understand. They may not understand what is understanding. In other words, if you give them a test, a list of questions, and they answer those questions right, and then you go over the questions that they had wrong, you reinforce the right answer into them. Now you can say to a higher degree of certainty that they understand. Or you ask them to summarize what they just learned in one sentence. It forces them to focus their attention on what did you get out of this? What did you just get out of this? And, ask questions, give them a chance. You have to give the employee an opportunity to ask questions. You can sit an employee in front of a DVD player and show them this and that. But if you don't ask them questions, you don't have an interaction like we're having right now. I cannot be sure that the knowledge and the information has been transmitted from me to you, because you may have a different idea of what's important and what's not important. So I want to make sure that you understand the big picture.
And in doing
not-
that, you're going to use the security data sheet, meaning that you just told us the security data sheet.
Safety data
Safety
sheet.
data sheet is the
Right.
initial sheet that everyone is governed by.
Right.
That's a universal sheet with a check and a balance.
Right.
And if everybody's using this check and balance sheet, that would be the sheet that I would use.
Right.
And again, keep an
That's
open
covering
form.
yourself. That's
Yes.
covering for you.
You know, it depends, and it varies from business to business, company to
Well,
company.
that's what I'm saying. You have to look at the situation. Like your business plan is different from my business plan. Like your Andy's business plan is different from yours. It's a case-by-case basis,
varies, right.
but it's the employer's responsibility. You can't claim ignorance of the law and think you can get away with it. You being in that particular business or industry should know what the rules and the regulations are, you know, by however means legally that you can. And then that's why you have professionals in different fields that you go in and specialize. Like I would specialize in hazard communication, the hazard communication standard. But there's also the Environmental Protection Agency. I've done work with the Environmental Protection Agency. They're concerned about chemicals getting into the atmosphere. Where you as an OSHA employer is concerned about chemicals inside the workplace that are affecting employees. So there's a different perspective, and Department of Transportation has another perspective. They're concerned about chemicals being transported across state lines from one community to another community. But the whole bottom line is you got to understand who is your targeted audience and what role they play and how they can be affected and what you can do in order to minimize or reduce or eliminate. We're getting to a point where we call prevention through design. In other words, a person loses a leg digging a ditch. Well, that person lost their leg from the conception point. Because if you thought about that person can lose a leg because he walked into a hole that wasn't properly barricaded and he lost his leg, then you would have in the beginning set up so that anytime a hole is dug, you will barricade or put yellow tape or jersey barricades or whatever. In other words, you got to think beyond the actual. You can't go by the seat of your pants anymore. You got to have a plan. Once it's in plan, it's in your head, and then it's also an intellectual property. If something happens to you, somebody can come and read your plan and understand your business and continue your business forward in the future. And that's what safety is about. It's about having a written plan, a written safety plan, or a written business plan. You can use that as a tool to monitor your progress or lack thereof progress. Andy?
Well, the thing that kind of still concerns me a little bit is the fact of the employer continually, with new things coming in, having to re-educate the employees.
It depends on the industry also, because if you're an electrical engineer or a computer information technology, the technology changes every 6 months or 18 months or whatever.
Right.
But if you're in an industry like flooring, the technology has been the same forever and ever. It's a slower pace, you know. So but as you get into faster pace environments, then that means that there's even more of a need for you to do advanced planning. And more of a need for you to have continuous training. You know, the requirement for continuous educational units,
That should
things
be
like
ongoing.
yeah, ongoing. But it depends. Like I say, it's a case-by-case basis. But you, as an employer, whatever industry you're in, you either chose that industry or you were drafted into that industry. But regardless of which way you got in, you're in it, and it's your responsibility to cover all the bases. That's the law. HAZCOM 1994 mixtures. See, for mixtures, the approach for a health hazard is to base it on a percentage cutoff of 0.1% for carcinogens, that's for cancer-causing chemicals, and 1% for all other effects. What does that mean to the average person? What does that mean? I mean, I see the word carcinogens. If they say cancer-causing, the big word, the big C, cancer.
Right.
That gets a person's attention more than carcinogens. You know, that kind of smooths over it, kind of gloss over it. In other words, 0.1% is very small. It's a very minute amount of chemicals. Once again, like I say, you get to the point sometimes you think you got to have an advanced degree in order to understand these stuff. And a technical advanced degree at that, not a business or whatever. The global harmonized system has a tiered approach to MIST, which means a tiered, meaning it's got a different level, kind of like with health plans. You got different tier drugs. They're going to cost you different amounts of money, and going to cost you different amounts of regulation, control. It says, with each health hazard class having a specific approach, step 1, use available test data on the mixture as a whole to classify the mixture based on the substance criteria. Step 2, use bridging principles to extrapolate. Now, what kind of language is that for a worker to understand? I mean, extrapolate. What is extrapolate? You know, you got to go to your dictionary. Extrapolate is to carry it out, project it out into the future. You know, so basically you're using statistics. Now, if you've never taken a statistics class, you understand we use statistics every day in our decision-making process. What are the chances of me crossing this street without getting hit by a car? If the car is coming down the road at 100 miles an hour versus if the car coming down the road at 15 miles an hour. You okay, Brother Joe?
Yeah, I'm good, brother.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.